Now we will be hearing some excerpts from Exodus 16. It's a long chapter, and I have extracted some excerpts. We're talking about Moses today, friends. And Moses calling the people, the Israelites, out of Egypt, what that looks like for them, and how it really was more difficult for them than they wanted to admit. So we'll just talk to you from Exodus 16. The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after they had departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate our fill of bread. For you've brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." And the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. And that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instruction or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it'll be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he's heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening, and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard your complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Say to the whole congregation," and Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining." And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses, "I've heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat. In the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening, quails came up and covered the camp. In the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It's the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as you need, an omer per person according to the number of persons, all provided for those in their own tents." Well, the Israelites did so, gathering more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed, and Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it became wormy and rotten. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it as much as needed. When the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil, and all that's left over put aside until the morning." So they put it aside until morning, just as Moses commanded them, and it did not rot, and there were no maggots in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it. On the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some people went out to gather, and they found none. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the 7th day." So the people learned, and they rested on the 7th day. The Israelites called it manna. It was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. The word of the Lord. When I first entered seminary, I was responding to a call that was loud and clear. God had hit me over the head with a 2x4, and so finally I was listening. And I enrolled part-time at Wesley Seminary in Washington, D.C. At my first day of orientation, everything seemed absolutely spot on. They even sang great songs. After all, my job as director of Christian education for a large church was becoming more and more difficult. There wasn't a lot of support from my colleagues of my choice to go to seminary, and the walls felt like they were closing in on me. I'd been directing programs for children and their parents for several years, and I felt kind of stagnant, moldy. The office, the space where I spent 40 hours a week, we called it the Hobbit Hole. You see, in order to make the angles of the building work and more efficient when they built on the new addition, they had walled in one of my windows with brick. So I looked out the window, and right here was brick. Seriously. It was a brick wall, 6 inches from my window. I felt quite claustrophobic in my space, and I also felt very alone, with not much human contact during the week at all except Sundays. God's voice was feeling farther and farther away each week, and in many ways I felt oppressed and a slave to my job instead of the job being life-giving. From the call to worship. While our spiritual ancestors were living in Egypt, they wondered, how long must we endure this oppression? I needed change, so God called me out of the wilderness, out of my loneliness, into this new place called seminary. And then I had my first class. And not having attended any college class in over 20 years, well, it had me a little bit spooked. Even though I felt called by God to seminary, I really hadn't committed. I hadn't committed. You see, I had bargained with God, and we had a conversation. Went something like this: hey, God, look, I'll go to this class, this one class, one class, right? And I'll try it, but I'm telling you, I can go right back to my job. I can go there, it's safe. So I'm just one class. I'm trying it, that's it. I was the big fish in the ocean at my job. In seminary, I was the tiny, tiny, tiny fish, along with a lot of very other smart and young students. Lots of fish. When I walked into my first class, where I was one of the oldest students, not the oldest, but one of the oldest, I started having second thoughts right away. Fear just enveloped me. What if I couldn't do the assignments? What if I didn't know how to write a paper anymore? I didn't know how to do all that. Study for a test. Memorizing the holy charts and the holy maps. Oh, dear God. I kept going, what if, what if, what if, what if? My job was looking pretty good when I entered that class and sat down in a student chair. From the call to worship. When they left Egypt and followed Moses in the desert, they wondered, is this really any better than our old life in Egypt? We find the Israelites in Exodus 16 complaining. Their grumbling could probably be heard across the desert. The Israelites were unhappy. Yes, they had escaped the Pharaoh and the oppression of slavery. Yes, God was on their side and sent them through the Red Sea unharmed, even though their oppressors drowned. But now, here they were in the desert with no food, no water, and nothing that they recognized. At least back in Egypt under Pharaoh's rule, they had some bread, a little bit of some porridge, a little bit of meat in their pots. And they knew when they'd get punished, when they'd get whipped. Yes, you heard me. They knew when they would get punished because they were slaves. We enter into the story in the middle of the wilderness wandering after the plagues, after the splitting of the Red Sea, after Miriam's beautiful song of freedom. The Israelites are liberated. They're free. Their oppressors have been defeated, but they're finding life difficult. If only we died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt when we sat by the pots of meat and ate our fill of bread, for you've brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. In our reading of Exodus, the Israelites encounter some of their first difficulties that were not in the regular rhythm of suffering to which they'd been accustomed to in their slavery in Egypt. Listen to that statement again. It was not in the regular rhythm of suffering.
Good morning. I want all you to close your eyes for just 5 seconds. Then you open them up and you think, this is the day the Lord has made just for us and everybody else in this whole world. We must rejoice and be glad in it, because it is a day he gave to us this day. As we learned today from the Israelites, there's a fear that grows within us in response to the unknown. It's just human nature. We all feel that way. Today we have an opportunity to give back to God what is God's, even though there's an unknown economic reality in our world today. Somehow, some way, we trust that God is in the thick of it with us. So even though we may be apprehensive, we share what we have. At the back of the room, there's an offering box that supports the ministries of Big Cove Church. There's also a box to support the Presbyterian Home for Children. For you at home, if you feel led by the Spirit to contribute to the missions of this church, go to our website, www.bigcovechurch.org. Now let's share our gifts.
So in honor of Father's Day, we're going to have people come up. Any man that wants to come up and line up here and over here so you can see the words. Line up so you can see the words. Any man, come on up so you can see the words. Can you see the words? As long as you can see the words, you're good. Any man that wants to come up, you can do it. You can do it. Sure. Any man, come on up. See if you can see it. You see the words? Ready? If the world from you withhold all its silver and its gold, and you have to give along fly into what we don't know. It's hard. My first class in seminary, by the way, was after the initial shock of being like the old room with all the old guy and all the youngsters. I mean, I was very old compared to them. It was really great. It was wonderful. This class was an Old Testament class, and I chose that on purpose. My first class was going to be an Old Testament class. Yes, I had to move out of my comfort zone, and I had to memorize ancient maps and take essay question exams and write the required papers where the research could take days and days and days. But the overall message in this class was that we could no longer look at the Old Testament the way we had as children. There was new evidence, new papyruses discovered, new tablets unearthed, and a new understanding of the ancient Hebrew language that gave us new insights more than ever before. And we needed to embrace this technology and this new science to really understand the people of the times, their lives, and God's work in them and through them. It was new, and it was exciting. However, many people in my class, 20% of that class, quit after the first day. The message of the new technology, the new way of looking at scriptures with new interpretations due to new data and scientific discovery, led some to feel uncomfortable. They'd have to leave their old ideals behind about Noah's Ark, the fall of Adam, the story of Jonah, the story of David at the door, and hear something new. Stepping off that leaf into something so radically new was so scary to my classmates, so disconcerting, that they abandoned seminary after one class to stay behind. Stay behind. What if we did that? From the call to worship, when we consider the cost of change, we wonder, what is the cost if I stay the same? There is a cost, friends, both personally if we stay behind on the leaf, and as a church if we stay behind on the leaf. The butterfly's wings have dried and fully extended. It's now time to let go of the leaf of the branch it clings to. And it's time for our church to embrace new things that God is sending our way, new ways of doing church, new ways of doing community, new ways of being a neighbor. It's time for us as God's children to step out of our comfort zones, to understand the cost of not flying, of not letting go and staying behind instead. But letting go of the past requires deep trust in the God who's promised to be with us always and to provide for us. How is this even possible? Because God promises to never leave us. He's covenanted with us, and he tells us, you too are my child. You can emerge to renewed life because I am with you. Get off the leaf and take the risk. Amen.